I was born in Boston, Massachusetts,
Okay, and the year?
1932.
Okay. Mrs. Chen?
I was born in Greenville, Mississippi in 1936, August 9th.
My dad was a merchant coming back and forth in China, and he's been here several times. And the last trip he brought Mom and me, in a sense, because I was conceived in China and dropped in Boston.
Okay.
He has brain damage.
Oh, no.
I was born in Greenville, Mississippi, and the living quarters of our grocery store at the corner of Ojai and Poplar Street. And I was delivered by an African-American midwife named Lena Collins, and my birth was certified by a physician named Dr. Jerome Hirsch. My great-grandfather actually had lived in Mississippi. He I'm really happy because I just found the immigration papers of one of his visits, and he was giving his interview with the immigration officers, and I just got a hold of that this past Monday, and this was the interview that he was giving to the immigration officers in Seattle in 1906. So that meant, and he stated that he had gone back to China several times and had been in Mississippi, actually operating a grocery store in Gunnison, Mississippi, even 20 years previously. And so that means we've been there in that state for a long time with my family.
I was born in a village outside of Guangzhou, China, which is on the Pearl River, one of the tributaries. And I was born February 19, 1936. I lived in China till I was 10 years old, and then migrated to the United States, first to El Paso, Texas. My father came not to the United States because the United States does not allow immigration from China in those days. He came to Mexico because Mexico has no immigration limits. The United States at that time do not allow Asians from that part of the world to immigrate to the United States. So he went to Mexico. Pancho Villa attacked Columbus, New Mexico. That's an act of war. So the United States Congress declared war on Mexico and sent General Blackjack Pershing down there. And with limited resources, they only have so many soldiers, and they don't have enough people to take care of the soldiers. So there was 200 plus Chinese Mexicans. Went to talk to the general. I said, General, we like to help you. Take you, wash your clothes, cook for you guys. The general says, oh, fine, that's fine, that's fine. But there's no pay. We don't have any, not much money for this project expedition. So they said, okay, we could go ahead and do it. And so all that time they were chasing Pancho Villa up and all back and forth in Chihuahua. And after the expedition was over, these 200 plus Chinese Mexicans approached General Pershing again. General, we help you get our part. Could you get us into the United States? The general says, well, let me write my president and Congress, see what they say. And Congress came back, sure, let them in. But no citizenship. Mm-hmm. So they all end up in, I forgot which base is in San Antonio. So that's when they end up in San Antonio. And then, after a few years, they start scattering. some stay in San Antonio, open a grocery store and restaurants. And then my father decided to go all the way to El Paso. And he and 5 other people opened a grocery store. And then after so many years, they cannot own property because they're not citizens. But after so many years, my father decided to become a citizen, and he had a hard time because he doesn't know English. After 3 or 4 tries, they finally gave him the citizenship.
I was born in 1953 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Well, I'm second generation. My father was first generation in South Africa. At the time, in Johannesburg, it was known amongst at least the villages where I come from as Kamsan, Golden Mountain, which was, I guess, also the name for San Francisco, but this was in South Africa. A few Southern Chinese, I guess mostly Cantonese and Hakka, had started to set up stores in South Africa. And so during the Sino-Japanese War, my grandfather decided that it may be too dangerous for my father to be in China. And there was a relative from the village who had already established himself in South Africa. And so my father was sent as a teenager to South Africa.
In high school, basically, in grammar school, in Mississippi, when we went to school, we were allowed into the white schools. And the reason why is because there were a very small number of Chinese in the community, which is rural Mississippi.
I was not able to, from grades 1 through 5, I could not go to the white schools. I was in a segregated school called the Oriental School, which was a one-room schoolhouse of Chinese children aged from about 6 to about, actually through 12th grade, actually. We did have that discrimination, but fortunately, I guess in a way, I was fortunate because our store was located in an area which was more multicultural. It was probably a lower income, but a working class neighborhood. We had whites, we had Lebanese, Jewish people, black people in my neighborhood. Back in my history too in my family's history, is the Donglong family. And they came with my great-grandfather from China. And that was a case that occurred in Rosedale, Mississippi in 1924. Berta and Martha Lum went to the school, the white school, in the fall. And they were asked to leave because they were not white. And that's back in 1924. And they hired a lawyer to take a case to sue for allowing their children to go to the white schools in Rosedale. The finding was, the judge ruled that as long as there were separate but equal facilities, that was the way the law was written, that they were neither white nor black, so there was no school for them. And the choice would be that they would go to the black school. And they did not like that idea, so they did take the case all the way to the Supreme Court of Mississippi, and actually it was taken to the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court then sent it back and said, we will not hear this and will stand with the state's decision. So consequently, they went across this, they lost that case, but it has become a famous civil rights case.
The apartheid regime made everybody have be registered under different ethnic groups, so therefore there was the white. The Chinese were Asian, then there were what they call the colored, which were the mixed races, and then there were what they call the blacks and the various tribes of the blacks, and then there were the East Indians who were also Asian. Chinese was somewhat different. in that we were a small community. There was a strong exclusion law which disallowed any Chinese immigrants. And in fact, when I was growing up, if a Chinese man married a Chinese lady outside of South Africa, she was allowed to come in. But if a Chinese lady married a Chinese man outside of South Africa, she had to leave the country. They would not let him in. And then we were all supposed to stay in our own little group area. The apartheid regime at that time envisioned every ethnic group living in separate areas, in separate neighborhoods, and only interacting on a commercial basis, but not on a social basis. The Chinese, however, in different parts of the country were treated a little differently. So in Port Elizabeth, where Cynthia, my wife, is from, the Chinese were forced into their own neighborhood. But in Johannesburg, the population and the city council was a little bit more cosmopolitan, more liberal, had more of a European feel, and was more English speaking, and therefore the Chinese were allowed to live in different enclaves. So we essentially were treated as if we were honorary white. We were not allowed the vote. We did not have a lot of the rights in terms of being able to establish commercial businesses as the whites were. We did not have the freedom to travel as whites. But we did go to schools that were predominantly white, and a lot of us lived in white neighborhoods and socially mixed with the whites. Although even that changed. In the beginning, the Chinese were not allowed into white cinemas. They were not allowed onto white buses. There is a story that the Japanese, who did a lot of trade with South Africa, who had no Japanese South Africans, one Japanese diplomat was denied entry onto a bus because they thought he was Chinese. That raised a diplomatic issue, and after that the South African, at least in Johannesburg, the Chinese were then allowed onto the white buses.
Went to school in El Paso and graduated from high school there, and then went to, at the time it was Texas Western, not UTEP. And I tried to get into medical school, and I spoke to the advisor. I says, I'd like to get into medical school. He says, forget it. We don't have the resource to educate you. I say, excuse me, what do you say? He says, we don't have the resource to educate minorities. You know, but he didn't say the prejudice. He just said, we don't have resources. I says, fine, thank you. And then I decided to go into pharmacy school because there's no restriction there.